And so we would come on and they'd be really confused. It's like I was just driving and now I'm standing next to my body. I don't get it. Or I was just walking and I got shot and now I'm just standing next to my body and I don't get it. So we would start kind of a process of, like, I would triage, and you're dead, you've been shot. We're going to start CPR. I'm going to transport you to the body, this, or to the hospital. This is what's happening. So telepathically, I'd be communicating. Being able to communicate and be there in people's last moments it's a tremendous honor.
One look, and I breathe.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Awakening to Love podcast. I am the Ascension Coach, James Valentine, back with another amazing, beautiful soul we're going to delve into a lot of juicy stuff, a lot of juicy topics. And I'm going to start by introducing our guest, Sarah K. Grace. Sarah is a psychic paramedic, author, healer, and she has possessed psychic abilities since the young age of 7. And she's going to share her short, extraordinary journey with us. Sarah is someone gifted in witnessing auras and spirits as a young child and growing up in South Dakota. And she has had this unique and amazing experiencing of guiding souls in traumatic events as a paramedic. Sarah's story is one of strength, power, resilience, spiritual insight, and healing. So I want to welcome to Awakening to Love, and also thank you, Sarah, for being so gracious, Sarah Grace.
And hello, and thank you for having me. And I love that you're out and about.
Absolutely. So, Sarah, I want to delve right into your journey. So everything just kind of happened, I'm assuming, at 7 years old, with you kind of recognizing that, wait, there's some strange shit going on here that I don't think anybody else recognizes but me. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of tell us that journey?
So I grew up on the Standing Rock Native American Indian Reservation in South Dakota, adjacent in a town called Mobridge, 2,000 people, middle of nowhere, pre-internet. So there was no outside access. And I was just a normal kid cruising around doing my thing. And one day I woke up and it started for me with clairvoyance, auric fields, colors, tracers. Then it moved into feeling clairsentience and just feeling, knowing, hearing, seeing spirits, etc., over a couple weeks or months period. And my home life was very volatile and not very safe in the way of me being able to just feel comfortable being like, hey, what's going on with this? But ultimately, because the energies did not subside, I decided to ask a family member. And unfortunately, I was shamed and condemned at that time. And they did the hellfire and brimstone bit. So here I am, this little kid who is going through like a lot of violence and chaos in the home life, not a lot of stability there. And then I'm awash in this sensory information, and to be shamed and condemned for it. That started my deep process of internalizing toxic shame, thinking there was something really wrong with me. And that really began my long odyssey of eventually coming to terms with being like this, understanding what it is and why, and then ultimately becoming empowered.
With the way that family member looked at you, and you feeling like wondering, is there something wrong with me? How did you manage that from that point on? Was it something that you maybe tried to repress, ignore, avoid, or did you just go, you know what, this is just what's happening, I'm going to embrace it?
Oh no, I was a hot mess. So when I was a kid, I was just trying to get through. And my initial way of coping was by overachieving. So very good athlete, very good at school. Everything was extremely high functioning, but internally I was really, really tight and just really confined and frightened. Tons of fear, didn't feel safe, didn't feel that I could let down. And after my mom my mom passed when I was 17 during my senior year, at the end of my senior year. And that really that's when I went off the rails. And so I got into drugs and alcohol. I wanted to try to make the stimulus go away. I didn't understand. My day-to-day experience still to this day is very much like being on low dose acid or ecstasy. There's colors and tracers, and there's just so much sensory information. I've got like 15 different screens of information available to me at any given time. And I didn't understand it and I didn't want it. And so my going into the drugs and alcohol was just trying to find a sense of normalcy, a sense of stability, a way to numb. But ultimately, I overdosed and I had a near-death experience. So I took that as far as I could before I had to turn things around and make a decision.
Yeah. And we're going to go into the near-death experience in a minute. But I heard you on another podcast mention what that experience was like. Now, it's interesting. I've spoken to two young family members, who themselves have had experiences similar. And I even myself, I remember being very young, and there was a bus that had drowned with children in it. And in a moment, I was in that experience, and one of them looked at me like, "You can see me? You can see us?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can see you." But what I'm recognizing is that the young people that are family members, loved ones of mine, I don't want to put them out there, but it's scaring them and they don't really know how to manage it. So at 7, 2 questions. What did it look like? Because you mentioned screens. What did it look like for you? And if there was fear, how did you manage that?
Okay, so when I was a kid, and I internalized that sense when the family member said, "Don't speak of this, we'll send you to a loony bin. This is hellfire and brimstone. You'll be condemned." I remember that moment because it was such a pivotal moment for my life, because I really internalized something wrong with me. And anybody just wants to belong, right? Everybody just wants safety and belonging and connection and to fit in with their family, or just at least have some sort of support. So I didn't understand. And so again, in addition to kind of it being the multisensory, if you go to Target or Best Buy or wherever, Walmart, and you go to the back of the store in electronics, and you know how there's all those TV screens? Well, it's like standing in the middle of that. And instead of everything playing the same, they're all playing different channels. And I have to focus really hard because the screen in the center is this reality. But just as prevalent in my experience are all of these other sensory, whether it's auditory, feeling, knowing, there's all of these different ways of perceiving. And so it takes me a tremendous amount of focus just to be present on the tangible, linear third dimension while still being aware of all the screens. So when I was a kid, like I said, I started overachieving, overexcelling. And when everything really shifted for me in terms of nuclear family and the fallout from that, that's when the bottom fell out and I slid into addiction.
When you see, well, I guess it can still spill into today. When you see a spirit or someone who's crossed over, are they just there, just kind of standing? Is there some kind of activity they're doing? Are they communicating with you? What is the kind of experience that you experience with them?
My experience when I was 7 was that I was terrified. I didn't understand. I didn't want it. And my experience, fast forward 25 years after I got myself all cleaned up and like started to figure things out and became a paramedic. My job as a medic was essentially becoming a midwife for people who had died traumatically or had some sort of, crises in the 911 system. Those souls and the people that were dying in front of me were oftentimes confused. They didn't understand what was going on. So I became able to come in and triage and handle the actual logistics of the physical 911 call, but telepathically communicate to the spirits that had, or the people, that had just died, and kind of like lay it out.
And when you see them, do they look like physical, like me? Or are they translucent? What kind of, how do you see them when you view them?
My experience is that human spirits look just like the person, except they're see-through, right? So we'd pull up on, a drive-by and there's a body on the
Mhm.
sidewalk and the soul is standing next to the body. It looks the same, but see-through. Same for a car accident, same for a building collapse, same for a fire, burn over, whatever, right? I mean, incineration's a different deal, but the soul is essentially, that's the way I would see it. When it comes to angels or celestials, they looked differently to me, or versus entities or things like that.
Okay. So let's touch on the entities because I imagine I'm also watching this as a listener. So as a listener, I'm wondering, is it just white? Do they, I can't imagine they have clothes on, or I can't imagine they have a kind of a type of clothing on, or do they?
The humans, you mean? The people that just died?
No, the people that just died. Is it their same clothes? Like, is it just white? Because if you're saying you see them similar to the way you see us, but you just see them as see-through, what does that form look like?
It looks just like you standing there and we're in the same clothes, but see-through.
Okay,
And
okay,
my experience on 911 calls, you got to remember, was very acute and rapid.
yeah,
So now when
yeah,
I go out and out, if I'm going to go to the restaurant or I'm going to Costco or wherever I'm going, like I can still see them and they may look a little bit gray or pallid. They're usually kind of just faded out, or they still have some semblance of clothes, you know, but it's just an awareness that there's a dead person there. And now it's like whether or not I'm going to engage them, which if I'm off duty, then I'm not. Yeah.
and they aware? Because I think I remember you saying they're aware of you, even though you may choose not to acknowledge them. You are aware that they are aware of you.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. There's more and more of us there's so many energetically sensitive people on the planet. There's tons that are
Yeah.
coming, incarnating, holding a really high vibration, very, very open now to energy. And so it's like we have this light. It's like a little lighthouse. And so in the spirit world, one, there's nothing to fear. Two, there's an awareness of it's everything and nothing. It's removing the boundaries and the confines of the mind, the senses, duality, gravity, the egoic infrastructure. But they can sense people that can see them, and I believe it's just a vibrational thing, but they can sense it and then they'll come. That's why it's like you hear people that are mediums and they got like a room full of people all the time, dead people all the time, and then they got to figure out how to handle that. It's pretty much the same.
Why do you think they kind of honed in on you,
I
where this
believe
became a part of who you are?
I believe this is a pre-birth incarnation cycle dharmic contract. We are all gifted in our own ways. Some people are gifted energetically, some people are gifted musically, some people intellectually or financially. Everybody's got giftedness. And my understanding is that I chose to come in to incarnate like this kind of in the era before. Now it's hip and cool, like energetic stuff and psychic stuff is trending on TikTok now. When I was growing up, that wasn't the case, right? And so we were coming in to kind of hold a specific resonance and learn about these gifts. And my understanding is that it has to do with the collective awakening, the shift that we are obviously experiencing. Belief structures aside, everybody can tell something's going on, right? Energetically and societally. And so I believe that it was a pre-birth contract for sure.
I love that. One of my big things is I love talking about parallel realities. I love talking about pre-birth, those kind of things. I'm not sure how much I'll get into either one of those in this, though I've heard you speak on those, touch on those on some of your interviews. The field of being a paramedic, getting into that field, like I know I'm a teacher. That's what I do. I'm gonna be in that space at some point in time. How did how were you led to be in that particular field as a paramedic?
It's a calling. Absolutely. I love kindergarten teachers and preschool teachers and stuff, and they look at me like, how could you be a paramedic? How could you deal with that? And I'm looking at them like, how could you be a pre-K teacher or kindergarten teacher, man? That's a calling. And my upbringing, the first 16 years of my life, was extraordinarily violent, dark, and chaotic. So my subconscious wiring in my original programs are able to handle that level of intensity. And it's like I was wired for it. I was prepped for it because of what I survived. And when I got into the 911 system, it was honestly like a duck to water. There's something in me, and first responders are a certain breed. Like, we are the people that run towards what everybody else is running away from. And whether it's our childhoods, or whether that we're type A alphas, or whether we're just like super, intense personalities, all of those are true typically. It's definitely a calling. And I had a sense that I should do that, but I was scared of it. Every time an ambulance would drive by, I got this, like, you should do that, go do that. But I was like, I could kill people. No. But ultimately, I got to a place in my life after my overdose, once I decided to live, once I decided to take full responsibility for myself, my behaviors, my choices, make changes, got myself totally cleaned up, and then I was led to get into EMS. And so I started in Los Angeles, in South Central.
I love, of all places, right? Two things. I call them catalyst experiences. Was there number one, a catalyst experience that at 7, that once this happened, this is when it began to show up? But then also for those who, because we're both healers, as a healer, for you to move through that version of you that was, addicted, was there a catalyst experience that you said, this is enough, I need to fulfill my calling?
Yes. Well, I was still very angry and reluctant. And so there was no one singular catalyst experience for me. What it was an entire upbringing of violence. And in addition to that, then I had this kind of annoying sensory experience that other people didn't seem to be having, that I was really pissed off about. Like, I didn't want it, I just wanted it to stop and to go away. And so that's why I was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And I had my near-death experience, which to me was just like taking off a heavy coat. I remembered essentially I was floating in this really warm, yummy bubble, and I felt such love and calm and nurturing that I had never felt. But I heard a female voice that I believed to be my guide and or my higher self, because she was not familiar to me in the sense of, oh, I know who that is, but I somehow knew her. And she was essentially like, we get it's been hard. I mean, she was way more eloquent, but she was like, we get it's been hard. You picked a hard path. But if you go back, you're actually going to help a lot of people with these, gifts. And so that was the reason that I chose to come back. And so, but really, I thought I was going to come back and everything would be laid out for me. Like, that was not the case. I still had to boots on ground, make the changes, and really get real. And honestly, James, and whoever's listening, wherever you are in your life, we've all been through shit. We've all had adversity. We've all had trauma in our own way, and we all handle it differently. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to us as the individual what we are going to do with it. I could have been extremely justified coming from where I came from if I just would have stayed on that addictive path and just snuffed out. People could have understood that, right? But there was a part of me that was like, I'm stubborn. I'm from the Midwest, so I'm stubborn. And there was this kind of knowing that it's like, no, there's more for me in the way of using these abilities. And so once I felt really sorry for myself for a long time. This is in my early 20s. I had a lot of anger. I felt kind of like I was owed something because I came from such wretched conditions, and then I got this stimulus. And the thing that changed it for me was like, okay, yeah, so all of that happened, and this is your experience, Sarah. What are you gonna do about it? Because there's nobody that's gonna come in and save you. There's nobody that's gonna come in and do it for you. People can be like, oh yeah, that's hard. That must be challenging, but they can't live it for you. So what am I going to do? And that was the game changer catalyst. That was my big pivot point, where I was like, okay, regardless of the fact that I'm dealing with this much stimulus all the time, I gotta lean in. I gotta take responsibility. I gotta take control of my life and become educated. So I
That's
did.
powerful, Seth. Yeah. Let's set up a situation where you got the call, you're arriving, and this could be a real life situation. You arrive at the scene. What what happens? What's taking place from that moment? What are you seeing and what are you doing?
My experience of coming on scene as a paramedic, and say we responded to a fire. It was a house fire, and there was a whole family in there that was trapped and they all died, for instance, right? Or we could do a school shooting, or we could do, there's any number, a car accident with
Yeah.
multiple casualties. But however, essentially we would come on scene and it would be the same thing of, I would just see the souls kind of standing there floating. In a traumatic death, it was really just confusing for the person, because you got to imagine this. And this is why, you guys, I swear, if you take nothing else, just please live your lives now, like today, right now. How can you live your life? What do you want to do? Because I saw every single day, people woke up, they had their Cheerios, they went through Starbucks drive-through, they came out and they got on the freeway, and bam, they get T-boned and it's over. They're dead, right? Or they're ejected or whatever. They didn't know they were going to die that day. They didn't have plans. That wasn't in their Google calendar, but that's the reality of what happened. And so we would come on and they'd be really confused. It's like, I was just driving and now I'm standing next to my body. I don't get it. Or I was just walking and I got shot and now I'm just standing next to my body and I don't get it. So we would start kind of a process of, like, I would triage, and you're dead, you've been shot, we're going to start CPR, I'm going to transport you to the body, or to the hospital, this is what's happening. So telepathically, I'd be communicating. Being able to communicate and be there in people's last moments it's a tremendous honor. And
Yeah.
I described it as being a midwife, because I could legitimately help to calm them down or help them understand what was happening. And then I would watch their deceased family members come greet them. And I would watch them leave with them. They would just disappear. Or I would watch angels come on to trauma calls. There was always celestial frequencies that came as that soul was beginning the process to be ready to cross to the light or transition, or whatever you want to call it. But time after time after time, countless times, I've witnessed so many deaths in so many situations over 15 years. And again, there's nothing to fear in it, right? But yeah, shared death experience for sure.
I almost got a little emotional with what you just said, because I remember a beloved family member, while she was in the hospital and she was getting ready to transition. My mother was there, and my mother said she seemed to be having a conversation with someone who wasn't there. What's going on in that moment? Is that what you just kind of described to us?
Yes. So my experience, there's a difference between a medical death and a traumatic death as far as what the person dying experiences. A medical death is a hospice and end stage disease process, more of, we knew it was coming. They're oftentimes in a hospital bed or just, supine laid down in their bed, whatever. And for over the course of a couple of, it could be days, it could be weeks, where the auric field itself begins to actually dilate. And we always hear the veil is thinning. Well, what does that mean? What it means is that the actual auric field that consolidates and keeps the consciousness and human experience of the individual intact dilates out. And as that begins to thin, all of these stimulus, all this is energy. It's around everyone all the time. The senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, everything is designed to keep the person thinking that they're just their little human self. It's part of the parrot.
Yeah.
It's why we, right? But that
Right.
begins to stretch open. And so then people are like, oh yeah, because they can see, whether it's their loved ones or their pets, or if they have religious archetypes or beliefs, and they'll start having full conversations. We hear all the time of people who are in hospice doing astral traveling. They can go check on their beloved family member in a different country, right? And they'll come back. We hear of people seeing pets or any of those types of things. And at the moments of death, my experience is that energetically, that person, it's really cool to see from a clairvoyant perspective. The chakras release like a ribbon, and it starts at the tail and it goes all the way up through the crown. And sometimes it's very fast and sometimes it's a little slower. But I watched the consciousness of that person as it's exiting the body, and I came to understand that is the light at the end of the tunnel. That's the tunnel, is the chakras releasing. So the person's going towards crown, higher consciousness, and then they'd shoot out the top of their head, and it would just be like this little puff of energy. If somebody was full of life and very gregarious, it would be a brighter stream. And if somebody was just over it, then it would just be like a little puff. But regardless, then they would reform to look like the person that had just the body. And I would see their loved ones and their pets or their whatever come in. So that was my experience on medical deaths. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I saw that, like a gazillion. And then trauma's trauma. It's confusing and so then I would be paramedicing them and triaging and telling them this is what's happening, but an angel would always come on traumas to calm them down.
What a beautiful kind of picture. And thank you for painting them for us. It's just beautiful to consider and even think about. So I want to ask some of the questions, and if it's out of your fear of understanding, that's totally fine. But I want to ask some of the questions because a lot of my community are people that obviously they want to know things like what's the meaning of life, but I also have some that are literally on their deathbed. I had someone reach out to me and they were like, is hell real? And then I did a video around that, and that created quite some feedback. So from your perspective, would you say hell is real, or is that something that we create with our beliefs?
Both. And have you looked around at all lately? we're kind of living it. Yeah. My understanding is that this is a dualistic paradigm. There's light, there's dark, there's masculine, feminine, yin. Both have to exist in order, again, for us to have this human experience. What is the point of life? For the experience. Can we grow? Can we learn? For sure. Do we have to? Is that why we came? No, not necessarily. Are we working out karmic contracts, ancestral programs, family lineage shit? Yeah, 100%. But we're not just in this life. We're in thousands of parallel lives. So it goes way beyond just this little. We as humans like to really feel important, so we're always thinking we're reincarnating back here, and this is where it's at. This is only one finger on the hand of many, my experience. Is hell real? Absolutely. It's predominantly vibrational. So yes, there is a lot of darkness and contrast on this planet. Is it bad? No, it has to exist for light to exist. Neither could exist without the other, and we're constantly shifting. So this is come and gone. This is cyclical. Humans as a species, we've come and gone 5 times, documented by science already. And now we're just in another vibrational shift where the dark is being really, really compressed because there's a whole bunch of light consciousness now coming in. This is a huge overlay, like 1,000, 2,000 year overlay, switching from, what is it, Piscean era into Aquarian era, right? This whole thing has been done before, you guys. And so it can be really overwhelming. We look out there, there's hurricanes, people are getting nuked in fires, everything's just like crazy. We're super destabilized, scarcity mindset. Everybody's freaked out and bubble wrapping themselves and trying not to die. Again, take a breath. What we have is today. The way that we retain our power is to focus our attention. In this moment around you, how can you calm, right? If we lean into like the hell realms or dark entities or any of that stuff, does it exist? Sure. But equal and opposite always exists simultaneously in this dimension. It has to happen or it could not be the duality. So what are we going to focus on? And it's so intense and severe that bypassing, which we see in the spiritual industry a lot, just like la la la, just love and rainbows, that isn't it. Because what we're being called to do as individuals now is go within and find and heal those elements of darkness, of insecurity, of fear. And my personal lived experience, this is why my upbringing, my experience with addiction is I took it as far as you can take it. I died and came back, right? It made me, it's all grist for the mill. It made me a better paramedic, which then made me a better healer. And it's about going down into myself and finding those areas of darkness that need to be integrated, loved, and it's alchemizing. It's not about getting rid of the dark aspects of myself. It's about softening and accepting, balancing that with the light consciousness sides of myself, holding both simultaneously, and then we can be very integrated and powerful.
Such an important and powerful message you just shared there. We all need to sit with that, contemplate that, and integrate that. You mentioned, and I try to stay away from this, but always kind of feel like I'm being channeled through what's said. So I'm going to do a video about this soon. But when we talk about parallel realities, different versions of ourselves, do you think the person that had the NDE is the same person that returned?
Ooh. Not always, but most of the time, yeah. We hear about those opt-in soul people, whatever, where they're like, I was whoever until I was 12 and now I'm whoever. Cool. Like that could be a thing. I don't doubt that that does exist. I think it's likely the minority. I think the majority of our incarnation cycles are contracted through the end of the life experience. That's been my experience of it anyway, in terms of watching a bunch of people die.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And the reason I asked that is because obviously, you know, we're shifting different parallel realities every billions a second. And whenever someone comes back, they, you know, it almost as if the world that they knew it falls apart. It's no longer consistent with who they are, you being an NDE yourself. It's no longer, so it can beg the question, or it could bring up the question, well, wait, is that a different version of them that showed back up? But I love your answer on that.
Different version in the way of consciousness, because when I came back and I had made the choice, then I brought a specific vibration back with me. And that vibration then permeated my cells, right? This is how this whole thing works. So when we start to, that's why it's like, you know, we all repeat the same things over and over in relationship or financial belief structures or whatevs, right? Until we have like a healing experience or a catharsis, and then all of a sudden that just doesn't fit anymore. And that the reason that is because we're having more wisdom, more light, more consciousness come into the cells, which radiates through our psyche, which holds a different resonance. And then it's designed to start to break up anything that's dense or is ready to dissolve. And that is like the my understanding of spiritual evolution, awakening, etc. Right? So likely the same person, soul, but as far as consciousness and vibration, they're coming back with like some new skills. It's whether or not they apply it. So if you have a huge, like a near-death experience, or you witness something, or you're like, your whole world gets rattled and you're like, holy shit, and you can't go back to the same old, it's designed that way. The invitation is to change, is to grow. And it takes courage to do that, because we have to let go of what we're so familiar with to be like, well, I don't know what it's like to be healthy and supported and loved and have everything I want. I'm used to death and chaos and violence, right? And it's not an unlearning, but letting go of, and then being willing to make changes to learn something new.
So good, so good. Such a great explanation. Another question, because again, pre-births are, pre-birth plannings are such big things that come up in my community. If you could answer this, why do you think our souls pick this experience? Because even when we talk about your experience at 7, your experience at when you were addicted, my experience, I've had 2 dark nights of the soul, those kind of experiences. When we, from the mind and ego perspective, we go, why would I choose that? But from a soul perspective, why do you think we pick these experiences?
It's growth. Yeah, because the universe, in terms of like the vastness of the macrocosm, having it all of these trillions of microcosmic experiences. Well, the way the universe continues to grow and to navigate is by expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. And so when we choose to come in and have this, there's karmic balancing that overlays over a lot of different lifetimes. There's different dimensions that are, when we get out into those higher planes and realms, the mind can't comprehend. If you think of going to a beach, every grain of sand is a different dimension, right? That's happening simultaneously, but there's the macrocosmic, it defies the concept of the human mind. Would I wish what I've been through on anybody? No. I barely survived it, man. You know what I'm saying? And it's so
I
funny.
am,
The spiritual world's like, oh, well, you chose this. Those are great words, and it may be true, but when we're in it, it does not help. That does not help anybody to be like, oh, you chose this. You chose to be so sensitive. It's like, what are we going to do about it? How can we actually, assist? And so I find those words to be kind of Western spiritualized a little bit, because on a higher plane, yeah, we chose it, but it's way bigger than we can conceptualize. It doesn't mean that it's like super fun in the way of it. I understand looking back now why, right? Because it's bricks and mortar. And I needed all of those experiences because it was extremely intense and heavy, and the pressure, and it forged me in the fire to be able to hold the level of awareness that I do now, right? And just be of service with it.
I love that. I love that. I was talking to a different version of myself yesterday. I was the one that went through all the pain, or who currently is, because there's only this now moment, was currently going through the pain. And I thanked him, because without him, there wouldn't be this version of me. Right. And so I'm even aware that even as there's these infinite versions of ourselves living these infinite lives, we're all still connected. We're all connected to their memories and all the things that they've gone through, but there would not be an us possible with you touching so many lives. And I see even greater, that like my higher self was saying, James, to be able to have this conversation with Sarah now is amazing, because of where this is taking you. And so I was grateful for that. But yeah, it's just these versions of us would not be possible. And I'm talked to a couple of NDEs who know that they continue to show up to release the fear that they've been carrying through different lifetimes. I guess with each lifetime they're releasing more and more, but that's one of the reasons why they're choosing these hard experiences so that they can finally confront that and as a result release it.
And one little
So I
caveat,
wanna,
James, that's
yeah,
perfectly stated. And as far as there's no element of us that's bad or wrong that needs to be released. We can make choices to release toxic relationships or methamphetamine addictions or compulsive, like McDonald's eating or whatever, right? We can release that. We can change that behavior. When it comes to the crunchy aspects of ourselves, impatience, jealousy, envy, insecurity, darkness, like whatever, that wants to be integrated. That wants to be brought in and softened and examined and accepted. We don't have to love it. Dang, I can be like that, right? And we all have that. So the more time that we just like soften and accept, then what happens is that integrates into the auric field and it becomes part of our power. So when people are in it, like you're having your life experience with heartbreak, another one of the spiritualisms that drives me bananas is like best life or like being on path. We can never be off path because this is it. This is now, we're here. And the highest version of ourselves is this. How can we be gentle? Because if we're trying to always be spiritual or on or think positive or be happy, we're adding pressure to ourselves that most people just do not have the bandwidth for right now. So it's really about being able to sink down into whether it's fatigue or overwhelm or sadness or the addictive spiral or whatever, and just gently come into ourselves and be like, hey, just like you're doing, you're talking to yourself like, yeah, man, this is some shit, right? Yeah, it's some shit. Here we are, holy crap, right? And it's not to me, and take this, you guys, take it, leave it, whatever resonates. But I've been in the spiritual world 20 years now, and I've seen a lot of different, like, ways of this playing out. And in my own experience, it's like, let's just be real about where we are to start. And then let's let a load off and just be like, what do we need in this moment? Do you need a drink of water? Do you need a nap? Do you need to sit in the sun for a second? Like really small. And then it'll start the process. Do you have a lot of anger you got to get out? There's all these ways to do that. Do you got some grief in there? Right? There's all these ways to do that. So that's what I do now, is working with people and just helping them, like, wherever you are, we got it. It's all right. There's protocols, there's ways, there's tools for people to integrate. But yeah, being real and just really being authentic with where you are and just trying to like soften into the shitty heaviness of it, understanding, one, it will pass, everything changes. Two, it's just energy. Three, the emotions might be horrible, but cyclically, they're about 3 minutes long in peak. So if we can just hang in and feel those intense discomfort, uncomfortable moments, then we literally squeeze through, and it's the snake that's shedding the skin to be able to integrate that part.
love how you articulated that. Love it, love it, love it. Just these last two questions, then I want to ask you how people can get in touch with you. So the thing that gravitated me towards you was on your own YouTube, you talk about the number one message that, and help me out if I got this wrong, that did people want us to know, or the number one message they have for us? What is that?
To live your life. One, they're fine. They're totally fine. And two, like if somebody died and they were in pain, they're out of pain, because it's like, again, shedding a heavy coat. So they're good. The message that they have is to please just live your life fully now. Just live right now. We are all 100% guaranteed going to die at some point. Will you live? That is your choice.
That is powerful. Last question. What do you see for, I guess, humanity, life even if we should even be worried about it, because I know you mentioned before about focusing on us, but do you have an idea about from the perspective of linear time, what's to come for humanity?
Continued big purge, which again, there's nothing to fear in death. Consciousness there's a lot of heaviness, density, and frenetic energy. As people shed their bodies en masse, then the collective consciousness it just shifts in vibration more rapidly. So I don't know if humanity as a whole is going to make the jump, to be honest with you, because we got a lot of density, we got a lot of dead weight and just heaviness that's happening. So it may bottleneck and it may reopen on the other side. What is the time frame for this? I don't know. You know, I've heard 2025 to 35 is kind of the dawning of the Aquarian. So more light energy will come. There's just, we don't know. And it's, what are we going to do today? What can you do today to live your life, to be happy, burn the nice candle, eat the cookie, go on the trip, tell the person you love them, you know, all the cliche shit, but like for real, man, like treat yourself to something nice today, because this is what we got.
I love it. I love it. We won't get into this, but I'll just say I often looked at COVID as a beginning of a shift. Obviously, we mourned and, you know, wasn't what we wanted of the people that had to pass, but I looked at that as the beginning stages of the purge. And obviously we know that they're fine, at least on the other side. How can people get in touch with you? And again, everyone, she has an amazing YouTube page, but how can people get in touch with you to learn more about what you do?
SarahKGrace.com, SarahKGrace.com. I work with people individually one-on-one. And if that doesn't work for you, then I have an online community called The Grace Place. And we have energetically sensitive people and people working to overcome their trauma and become empowered from all over the world in there. So you can come check that out. Plus, I got Journey into Grace, Tales of a Psychic Paramedic. That was my first book that's going to eventually become a scripted television series that's in motion. And what I'm building and creating now, James, is called Empath X. And it's going to be a real life school for the gifted. So talking about really practically, all right, if you feel stuff, if you see stuff, if you hear stuff, here's what to do with it. This is how you manage it in the everyday, in the real world.
Sir, I just want to thank you for your patience with me.
Oh, dude, it's all good. I love it.
You are an amazing, beautiful soul. I hope at some point in the future you become a friend of the channel where we bring you back and answer more things and you can tell us about the amazing things that you do. But I just want to say I appreciate you. And as I often say to my listeners, I love you and I appreciate you. And both Sarah and I say goodbye for now.